A black Escalade sat parked across the street from a brownstone apartment building in Beverly Hills. The engine was off. The headlights were off. The windows were tinted so dark that nobody walking by would have any idea that someone was sitting inside, watching the building like his life depended on it. Young-soo Yoon had not moved in 5 hours. His driver, Mr. Pak, had fallen asleep in the front seat about 2 hours ago. His head was tilted against the window, and every few minutes he let out a soft snore that would have annoyed Young-soo on any normal night. But tonight was not a normal night. Tonight, Young-soo could not hear anything except the echo of a stranger's voice playing on a loop inside his head. He had called Sharon at 10 that evening. He always called her around that time. It had become a habit over the past 3 months, when he never planned and never acknowledged out loud but never missed. Every night, somewhere around 10, he would find a quiet corner wherever he was, pull out his phone, and dial her number. Sometimes they talked for 5 minutes. Sometimes they talked for an hour. She would tell him about her day, about a new melody she was working on, about something funny her brother said. He would mostly listen. He liked listening to her. Her voice was the only sound in the world that made his chest feel less tight. But tonight, someone else answered her phone. It was a man. The voice was deep, casual, and completely unbothered. There was noise in the background, like a television playing. The man picked up and said, "Hello?" And when Young-soo asked for Sharon, the man laughed. Not a mean laugh, just easy, comfortable, like he belonged wherever he was. "She's busy right now, bro." Then the line went dead. Young-soo sat in the back of his car and stared at his phone for a long time. He replayed the voice in his head. He analyzed the tone, the casualness, the word bro, the laugh. The fact that this man had access to Sharon's phone, was in her apartment, and felt comfortable enough to answer a call and dismiss the person on the other end. He told Mr. Pak to reroute. They had been on the way to Lax. Young-soo had a flight to Seoul that night for a meeting worth $400 million. It was a deal he had been building for 7 months. His entire executive team was already on the ground in Korea, preparing materials, confirming schedules, setting up the conference room at the Yoon Group headquarters. His chief financial officer had texted him 3 times during the drive to the airport, confirming final numbers. Young-soo told Mr. Pak to turn around and drive to Beverly Hills. Mr. Pak glanced in the rearview mirror but said nothing. He had worked for Young-soo for 9 years. He knew when to ask questions and when to simply drive. Now here they were, 5 hours later, parked in the dark on a quiet Beverly Hills street, watching the warm glow of a second-floor window that had not gone dark all night. Young-soo Yoon was not the kind of man who waited for anyone. He was the CEO of the Yoon Group, a Korean business empire that operated across 3 continents. Luxury real estate, 5-star hotels in Manhattan, San Francisco, and Miami. Private equity stakes in technology companies that most people would not even hear about for another 5 years. His family's influence stretched from Seoul to Wall Street, and in certain circles, people did not say his last name without lowering their voice. His father, the elder Yoon, had built the foundation of the empire through old-world connections in Korea. The kind of connections that came with power, silence, and a reputation that preceded any introduction. Young-soo had inherited that reputation along with the business. People feared him not because he raised his voice or made threats. They feared him because he never needed to. He simply looked at someone, and they understood that crossing him would be the last significant decision they ever made. He was 33 years old. He had closed deals that reshaped skylines. He had walked into rooms full of men twice his age and walked out with everything he wanted. He did not chase. He did not beg. He did not sit outside anyone's apartment in the dark, wondering if the woman he could not stop thinking about was spending the night with another man. And yet here he was, doing exactly that. Because the truth was, Young-soo Yoon, the man who controlled rooms with a glance and empires with a phone call, had absolutely no control over what Sharon Whitmore did to him. He met her 3 months ago. It was at a private album listening party in a penthouse in San Francisco. She was the unsigned artist invited to perform 2 songs. He was the investor who owned the building. There were maybe 40 people in the room, important people. Label executives, producers, a few celebrities who came to be seen more than to listen. Sharon walked onto the small stage they had set up near the floor-to-ceiling windows, and she did not look nervous. She did not look impressed by the room. She looked calm. She wore a simple black dress that was not designer, and her hair was pulled back, and she held the microphone like it was the most natural thing in the world. Then she sang. Yongsoo had heard a lot of music in his life. He funded concert venues. He attended operas in Seoul and jazz clubs in New York. He appreciated music the way he appreciated architecture, as something well-constructed and technically impressive. But Sharon did not sing like someone trying to be technically impressive. She sang like someone who had been carrying something heavy for a long time and had finally found a way to set it down. Her voice filled the room. Not loudly, not dramatically. It just filled it, the way warm air fills a space in winter, quietly and completely, until you realize the cold is gone and you do not know exactly when it left. Yongsoo stood near the back of the room with a glass of whiskey he had not touched. He watched her. She was a black woman with fair skin and deep brown eyes that caught the light every time she turned her head. She looked out at the audience as she sang, and she did something that no one in that room had done to Yongsoo in years. She looked at him the same way she looked at everyone else. Not with fear, not with recognition, not with the nervous deference he was used to receiving from people who knew his name or his net worth. She looked at him like he was just another person in the room. That drove him absolutely crazy. Because Yongsoo was used to being the only person who mattered in any room he entered. And this woman, this unsigned singer from Arizona, looked at him like he was ordinary. He had not been able to stop thinking about her since. Over the past 3 months, they had fallen into something that neither of them had defined. It was not dating. They had never been on an official date. It was not a relationship. They had never had that conversation. But Yongsoo called her every night. He sent her flowers every Monday. White lilies, because she mentioned once that they were her mother's favorite, and her mother had passed when she was 19. He showed up to her small performances unannounced. A lounge in Santa Monica. A rooftop event in Malibu. A tiny venue in Pasadena where she sang to an audience of maybe 50 people, and every single one of them left looking like they had just experienced something they could not explain. He always stood in the back. He always left before she could find him in the crowd. He always texted her afterward, something brief. "You sounded good tonight." Nothing more. Nothing that revealed the fact that hearing her sing made him feel like the ground under his feet was shifting. Sharon knew something was building between them. She felt it. But Yongsoo had never once told her directly what she meant to him. He did not know how. He had never learned. In his family, love was not spoken. It was demonstrated through duty, through sacrifice, through showing up and doing what needed to be done without ever numbing the feeling behind it. So he showed up. He always showed up. He just never told her why. And now, sitting in the dark outside her apartment, watching her window like a man who had lost everything and did not even realize it yet, Yongsoo understood something that terrified him. He was not here because he was angry. He was not here because he was possessive. He was here because the thought of losing Sharon Whitmore to someone else made him feel a kind of pain he had no strategy for. No business plan. No negotiation tactic. No exit strategy. He was here because he was in love, and he had no idea what to do about it. His phone lit up on his lap. Her name. She was calling him back again. This was the 4th time. He watched her name glow on the screen until it went dark again. Now let me ask you something before we keep going. If a man who never waits for anybody is sitting outside your house in the dark all night because another man picked up your phone, does that mean he is in love? Or does it mean he is just too proud to admit he is scared of losing you? Tell me what you think in the comments. I await your comments and also do well to like the video as well. Now let's continue. To understand what actually happened that night, the story needs to rewind a few hours. Earlier that evening, Sharon was in her apartment. She had been rehearsing for 6 hours straight. There was a showcase coming up at a high-profile lounge in Palo Alto, and it was the biggest performance of her career so far. Her manager, a sharp, fast-talking woman named Colette Barnes, had pulled every string she had to get Sharon on that stage. There would be A&R representatives in the audience, real ones, from labels that could change Sharon's life overnight. Sharon was determined to be perfect. She stood in her living room with sheet music spread across the coffee table, a cup of honey lemon tea going cold on the counter, and her voice cracking on the high note of the 3rd song for the 5th time in a row. Her throat was raw. Her body was tired. She finally stopped, pressed her palms against her eyes, and decided to take a shower. She left her phone on the kitchen counter and disappeared into the bathroom. That was when Desmond Whitmore walked in. Desmond was Sharon's older brother, 31 years old, 6'2", built like he played football in college, which he did, until a knee injury ended that dream and he pivoted into physical therapy. He worked at a clinic in Sacramento and was quietly becoming one of the most requested therapists in the area. He was also the most overprotective brother in the state of California, possibly the entire West Coast. Desmond had a key to Sharon's apartment because he had helped her move in 8 months ago when she first relocated to Beverly Hills. He drove down from Sacramento that evening because he had 2 days off and wanted to check on his sister. He did this regularly. He never announced it ahead of time. He just showed up, ate whatever was in her fridge, slept in her guest room, and spent the entire visit asking if she was eating enough and whether any men were bothering her. He walked in, dropped his overnight bag by the door, kicked off his sneakers near the entrance, and heard the shower running. He wandered into the kitchen, opened the fridge, and grabbed a can of ginger ale. That was when Sharon's phone started ringing on the counter. Desmond looked at the screen. The caller ID said JS, no last name, no photo, just 2 letters. Desmond had no idea who JS was. Sharon had not told her family anything about Yongsoo. There was nothing official to tell. She and Yongsoo had not defined what they were. She was not going to call her brother and say, "Hey, so there's this incredibly intense Korean billionaire who sends me flowers and shows up at my shows and calls me every night, but has never actually told me how he feels." That was not a conversation she was ready to have. Especially not with Desmond, who would immediately drive to Beverly Hills and stand on Yongsoo's doorstep demanding an explanation. So Desmond picked up the phone the way Desmond picked up everything, casually. "Hello." There was a pause on the other end, then a voice, deep, controlled, the kind of voice that sounded like it was not used to being questioned. "Is Sharon there?" Desmond leaned back against the counter and grinned. He did not know this voice. He did not know this man. And Desmond's default setting when an unknown male called his sister's phone was light antagonism. "She's busy right now, bro." He hung up. He took a sip of his ginger ale. He did not think about it again. When Sharon got out of the shower 15 minutes later, she wrapped herself in a towel and walked into the kitchen to grab her phone. She saw the missed call from JS and her stomach did a small flip. She called him back immediately. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. She frowned. That was strange. Yongsoo always picked up. Always. Even if he was in the middle of something, he would answer, say something brief like, "I'll call you back in 10, and hang up. He never let her call go unanswered. She texted him, "Hey, sorry I missed your call, was in the shower, everything okay?" No response. She waited 5 minutes and called again. Voicemail. She texted again, "Yongsoo." Nothing. A knot started forming in her stomach. She sat on the edge of her bed, holding her phone, and tried to think of a reason he would suddenly go silent. He had never done this before. In 3 months of whatever this was between them, he had never once ignored her. Desmond wandered into her room eating a bag of chips. "You good?" "Did someone call my phone while I was in the shower?" Desmond shrugged. "Yeah, some guy, JS or something, I told him you were busy." Sharon stared at her brother. The blood drained from her face. "You told him what?" "That you were busy. Why, who is he?" Sharon closed her eyes. She pressed her fingers against her temples. She could already see exactly how this had played out in Yongsoo's mind. A man answering her phone at night. A casual tone. "She's busy right now, bro." To Desmond, it meant nothing. To Yongsoo, it meant everything. "Desmond," she said slowly, "that was someone important." "Important how?" "Important in a way that I can't explain right now, because I'm too busy trying to figure out how to fix this." Desmond looked confused. He looked at his bag of chips. He looked back at Sharon. "I just told him you were busy. That's not even a lie. You were in the shower." Sharon grabbed her phone and tried calling Yongsoo one more time. She listened to it ring. She willed him to pick up. She could picture him sitting somewhere, staring at her name on his screen and choosing not to answer. That was exactly what he would do. He would not call and ask for an explanation. He would not send a text demanding to know who the man was. He would just go silent and let the silence say everything he was too proud to put into words. The call went to voicemail again. Sharon sat in the dark for a long time after Desmond went to the guest room. She looked out her window at the street below. It was quiet. Just parked cars and streetlights and the faint sound of someone's television from a neighboring apartment. She did not notice the black Escalade parked across the street with its engine off, and its windows tinted dark. And 4 stories below her window, Young-soo sat perfectly still in the back seat, watching the light in her apartment finally go off. He wondered if the man was still in there. He wondered if the man was lying next to her in the dark. He wondered if he had waited too long to tell her what she meant to him, and now someone else had stepped into the space he had been too afraid to fill. His phone lit up one more time with her name. He watched it ring. His thumb hovered over the screen. He let it go to voicemail. Morning came slowly. The sky over Beverly Hills shifted from black to deep blue to the first pale streaks of pink. The street was still quiet. A jogger passed by with a golden retriever. A sprinkler clicked on somewhere down the block. Mr. Pack stirred in the front seat, blinked, and looked around. He glanced in the rearview mirror. Young-soo was still sitting in the same position, still awake, still staring at the brownstone building across the street. "Sir," Mr. Pack said carefully, "should we go?" Young-soo did not answer. He opened the car door and stepped out. The morning air was cool against his face. He had not slept. He had not eaten since lunch the previous day. His suit was wrinkled, which was something that almost never happened because Young-soo treated his appearance the way he treated his business, with precision and control. But right now, nothing about him felt controlled. He crossed the street. He walked up to the front door of the building. He found her unit number on the call box and pressed the buzzer. It took a few minutes. Then the intercom crackled. "Hello," her voice was groggy, confused. It was barely 6 in the morning. "It's me," he said. A long pause, then the door buzzed open. He walked up one flight of stairs. She was standing in the doorway of her apartment when he reached the landing. She was wearing an oversized t-shirt that fell to her mid-thigh and a pair of sleep shorts. Her bonnet was slightly crooked. Her eyes were puffy from sleep. She looked at him like she was not entirely sure she was awake. "Young-soo, what are you doing here? It's 6 in the morning." He did not answer the question. His eyes moved past her into the apartment. He scanned the hallway, the living room, the kitchen counter. He was doing it automatically, the way he assessed any room he walked into. Cataloging details, looking for information. Sharon noticed immediately. She was not stupid. She knew what he was doing. She knew what he was looking for. She stepped to the side and held the door open wider. "You want to come in and search the place? Because that's what it looks like you're trying to do." He walked in. The apartment was clean and small. A cup of cold tea on the counter. Sheet music scattered across the coffee table. A blanket draped over the arm of the couch. And by the front door, a pair of men's sneakers, size 12, white Nike Air Force Ones. Young-soo stared at those sneakers like they personally offended him. Sharon followed his gaze. She almost laughed. Almost. But the situation was too heavy for laughter, so instead she crossed her arms and said, "Those are Desmond's." Young-soo looked at her. "My brother," she said. "Desmond. He drove down from Sacramento last night. He has a key. He does this sometimes. He crashes in my guest room because he's too cheap to get a hotel." "Your brother?" "Yes, my brother, 6'2". Loud. Thinks he's the funniest person alive. And he is almost certainly the one who answered my phone last night when you called, because I was in the shower and he has no concept of boundaries." The tension in Young-soo's jaw did not release. Something shifted in his eyes, though. Not relief exactly. More like the realization that he had just spent the entire night suffering over something that had a perfectly simple explanation. And instead of feeling better, he felt worse. Because now he was standing in this woman's apartment at 6 in the morning with wrinkled clothes and dark circles under his eyes, and she could see exactly what he had done. "You sat outside my apartment all night," Sharon said. It was not a question. He did not deny it. She shook her head slowly. Yongsu, you could have just called me back. You could have texted me. You could have just asked. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I don't ask. And the way he said it made Sharon's chest tighten, because she understood what he meant. She understood that this man, this impossibly powerful, impossibly controlled man, had never in his adult life asked anyone for reassurance. He did not know the language for it. He did not know how to say, was that a man in your apartment? Are you seeing someone? Am I losing you? Those words did not exist in his vocabulary. So instead he sat in a car in the dark for 5 hours and tortured himself with every possible scenario. She wanted to be angry. Part of her was angry, but a bigger part of her was something else entirely, something that felt dangerously close to tenderness. The guest room door opened, and Desmond walked out in a Sacramento Kings t-shirt and basketball shorts, rubbing his eyes. He stopped when he saw Yongsu standing in the living room. Yo, Desmond said, suddenly very awake. Who is this? Sharon sighed. Desmond, this is Yongsu. Yongsu, this is my brother Desmond, the one who answered my phone last night and apparently started an international incident. Desmond looked at Yongsu. Yongsu looked at Desmond. There was a long, loaded silence in which both men sized each other up. Then Yongsu gave Desmond a short bow. It was subtle, respectful, the kind of bow that was almost invisible if you were not paying attention, but deeply significant in Korean culture. Desmond blinked, completely caught off guard. He looked at Sharon with wide eyes and mouthed, "We are talking about this later." Yongsu did not stay long. He was not the kind of man who lingered in uncomfortable situations. He said very little while he was there, but before he walked out the door, he stopped and turned back to Sharon. Your showcase in Palo Alto, what time is it? She told him. He nodded once, and then he was gone. Sharon stood in the doorway and watched the black Escalade pull away from the curb. She stayed there for a long time, her hand resting on the door frame, her mind turning over something that frightened her. She was falling for a man who would rather sit outside her house all night in pain than simply ask her if she was his. 3 days later, Sharon was backstage at an upscale jazz and soul lounge in Palo Alto. The venue was called Vellum. It was intimate, the kind of place where the tables had candles and the audience actually listened. Maybe 200 seats, and every single one was filled. Colette, Sharon's manager, was backstage with her, moving at twice the speed of everyone else and talking at 3 times the volume. Okay, listen to me, Colette said, adjusting the collar of Sharon's dress. There are 2 A&R reps from Atlantic in the 4th row. There is a features editor from Rolling Stone sitting near the bar. And I think I saw someone from Spotify's editorial team near the entrance. This is not a regular show. This is the show. You understand? Sharon nodded, but she was not thinking about the A&R reps or the Rolling Stone editor. She was thinking about the fact that 3 days ago, Yongsu had asked what time this showcase was. He had never asked her something like that without a reason. She went on stage. The lights dimmed. A single spotlight caught her as she settled onto the stool they had placed center stage. She adjusted the microphone, and for a moment the room was completely silent. She opened with an original song. She had written it 2 weeks ago, late at night, sitting on her bedroom floor with a guitar she barely knew how to play. The chords were simple. The lyrics were simpler. It was a song about wanting someone who stands right next to you but never reaches out. Someone who shows up but never stays. Someone who fills a room with his presence and leaves it empty when he goes. She sang the first verse, and something happened in the room. People stopped moving. Waiters paused mid-step. Conversations died. Her voice moved through the space like something physical, like warm water rising around your chest, like the feeling you get right before you cry but you do not know why yet. Yongsu was standing at the back of the room, near the bar. He had told Victor Ri, his head of security, to wait outside. He wanted to be alone for this. He was wearing a dark suit. He stood with one hand resting on the bar counter and he did not move. He did not blink. He watched Sharon sing and something in his face cracked, not in a dramatic way, not in a way anyone else would notice, but his hand gripped the edge of the counter a little tighter. His jaw set a little harder, because he was listening to the lyrics and he understood them. He understood that this song was about him. Every single word. Sharon finished her set to a standing ovation. People were on their feet. A woman in the second row was crying. The A and R reps were leaning toward each other, whispering fast. Colette was in the corner trying very hard not to scream. Sharon stepped off stage and her eyes went straight to the back of the room. Young-soo was still there. He had not left this time. Their eyes met across the crowd, and for a moment everything else disappeared. The noise, the applause, the people. It was just the two of them, looking at each other across a room full of strangers, and something in that look said more than either of them had ever said out loud. Then someone stepped between them. His name was Bryce Calloway. He was a music producer based in Atherton, just a few miles from Palo Alto. Tall, well-dressed, confident in the way that men who are used to being the most charming person in the room are always confident. He appeared in front of Sharon with a wide smile and an outstretched hand. "That was unbelievable," he said. "Truly, I haven't heard a voice like that in maybe 10 years. Sharon shook his hand politely. "Thank you, I appreciate that." Bryce reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. It was thick, textured, expensive. "I'd love to take you to dinner sometime this week. Talk about your sound. I think there's something really special here, and I'd like to be part of helping the world hear it." Sharon took the card. She did not commit to anything. She just smiled and said, "I'll have my manager reach out." From the back of the room, Young-soo watched this exchange. He saw the business card. He saw the way Bryce leaned in when he spoke to her. He saw the easy, practiced confidence of a man who knew exactly what he was doing. Young-soo's face went completely still. That dangerous stillness that people who knew him had learned to recognize. It was not anger exactly. It was something colder, something more controlled. It was the look he wore in boardrooms right before he dismantled someone's entire position without raising his voice. He did not approach Sharon. He did not interrupt. He did not make a scene. He turned and walked out of the venue without saying a single word to her. Sharon saw him leave. She watched the back of his dark suit disappear through the door, and she felt the ground shift under her feet. She was still holding Bryce Calloway's business card in her hand, and it suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Over the next week, Young-soo disappeared. No calls, no flowers, no unannounced appearances at her shows. The daily rhythm that Sharon had gotten used to, the rhythm that had quietly become the most important part of her day, went completely silent. She texted him twice. The first time she said, "Hey, missed hearing from you, hope everything's okay." He did not respond for 14 hours. When he finally did, it was a single sentence. "I'm handling business in Manhattan." No follow-up, no phone call, nothing. The second time she texted, "The show in Palo Alto went really well. Wish you could have stayed longer." He read it. He did not reply. Sharon told herself not to spiral. She told herself she was a grown woman with a career to focus on and a life that existed outside of whatever Young-soo Yoon was or was not feeling. She had a new opportunity in front of her. Bryce Calloway's team had reached out formally to Colette and pitched a production partnership. On paper, it looked incredible. Bryce had produced for major artists. His studio in Atherton was world-class. The deal included studio time, songwriting collaboration, and potential distribution through his independent label. Colette was thrilled. "This is exactly the kind of partnership that can take you from trending to permanent," she said. "Do you know how many artists would kill for this kind of access?" Sharon agreed to take the meeting. She went to Bryce's studio on a Wednesday afternoon. It was everything she expected. State-of-the-art equipment, platinum records on the walls, a lounge area with leather couches and a refrigerator stocked with sparkling water and organic juices. Bryce gave her a full tour. He played her tracks he was currently producing. He asked about her influences, her process, her goals. He was good. He knew music. He understood what made a voice special, and he told Sharon things about her own singing that even she had not articulated before. "You don't just hit notes," he said. "You live inside them. That's why people cry when you sing. You're not performing an emotion. You're feeling it and they're catching it." Sharon appreciated the insight, but there were small things she noticed. The way Bryce stood a little too close when they were reviewing tracks at the mixing board. The way his hand landed on the small of her back when he walked her from one room to the next. The way he said casually, over coffee in his lounge, "You don't need some mystery billionaire hovering around your career. You need someone who actually understands your art." Sharon set her coffee down. "What do you mean by that?" Bryce smiled. It was the kind of smile that was designed to look disarming. "Everybody in the industry knows Yongsoo Yoon has been circling you. I'm just saying, money isn't the same thing as support. Real support comes from someone who understands what you do, not just someone who can afford to be in the room." Sharon did not respond. She picked her coffee back up and took a sip, but something about the way he said it sat wrong in her chest. There was an edge underneath the charm, a possessiveness dressed up as professional advice. Meanwhile, in Manhattan, Yongsoo was sitting in his office on the 44th floor of a building he owned near Central Park. He had been in back-to-back meetings all week. The Seoul deal had been rescheduled. His legal team was restructuring contracts. His chief operating officer kept appearing at his door with questions that required immediate answers. But Victor Ri, who had been with Yongsoo for 6 years and could read his moods better than anyone alive, noticed something. Between every meeting, Yongsoo checked his phone. Specifically, he kept opening Sharon's social media page. She had posted a video of herself singing in a studio. The studio looked expensive. The lighting was professional. And in the caption, Bryce Calloway was tagged. There was a comment from Bryce underneath the post, a fire emoji and the words, "The world isn't ready." Yongsoo stared at that comment for a long time. Then he put his phone face down on his desk and did not touch it for 3 hours. That night, Victor found Yongsoo standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Manhattan penthouse, looking out at the city. The skyline was brilliant, all glass and light, and Yongsoo saw none of it. Victor stood a few feet behind him and said, "You know, boss, for a man who says he doesn't chase, you haven't stopped running toward her since San Francisco." Yongsoo did not respond. Victor continued. He was one of the only people in the world who could speak freely to Yongsoo without consequence. "Calloway has a reputation. He uses studio access to get close to female artists. Nothing criminal on the surface, but nothing clean either. 2 female singers have quietly cut ties with him in the past 18 months. Nobody talks about the details, but the pattern is there." Yongsoo turned his head slightly. His eyes were sharp. That look Victor had seen before. The look that meant someone had made the mistake of entering Yongsoo's orbit in a way that could threaten something he cared about. "Find out why they left," Yongsoo said. Victor nodded and walked out of the room. Victor's investigation took 4 days. What he found confirmed everything he suspected, and then some. Bryce Calloway was not dangerous in the way most people imagined when they heard the word dangerous. He did not threaten people. He did not raise his voice. He did not do anything that would show up on a police report. What Bryce did was far more calculated than that. He had a pattern. He identified rising female artists, women with genuine talent who had not yet broken through to mainstream success. He offered them production deals that looked generous on the surface. Studio time, creative collaboration, access to industry connections. The kind of deal that an unsigned artist with a dream and a good voice would be crazy to turn down. But buried in the fine print of those contracts were clauses that most people without an entertainment lawyer would never catch. Ownership clauses, branding rights, publishing splits that heavily favored Bryce's company. By the time an artist signed, she had unknowingly given away control of her own music, her own image, and her own career trajectory. 2 artists had learned this the hard way. The first was a singer from San Jose who had signed with Bryce 2 years ago. Within 6 months, she realized she could not release music, book shows, or even post certain content on social media without Bryce's approval. She spent a year in a legal battle that drained her savings before finally getting out of the contract. She had to start over under a completely different name. Her original catalog still belonged to Bryce's label. The second artist was a vocalist from Portland. Her situation followed the same pattern. She signed what she thought was a fair deal. She discovered the ownership clauses too late. She walked away quietly, unwilling to fight publicly because she was afraid of being blacklisted in the industry. But there was something else, something more personal. Victor talked to both women, and they both described the same dynamic. Bryce did not just sign them as artists. He positioned himself as the center of their professional and personal lives. He told them their current managers were not good enough. He suggested they distance themselves from friends and family members who didn't understand the industry. He made himself their primary point of contact for everything: creative decisions, business strategy, even personal advice. By the time they realized what was happening, they were isolated and dependent on a man who controlled every aspect of their career. Neither woman had reported him. Neither woman had spoken publicly. The music industry was small, and Bryce had connections. Until now. Victor brought everything to Yong-soo: documents, testimonies, contract comparisons. He laid it all out in Yong-soo's Manhattan office on a Thursday afternoon. Yong-soo read through every page without speaking. When he finished, he closed the folder and said, "Book a flight back to California, tonight." But he did not go to Sharon first. He went to Colette. He met Sharon's manager at a restaurant in Palo Alto. Colette arrived looking confused and slightly suspicious. She had met Yong-soo once before, briefly, and she knew enough about him to know that a meeting request from the CEO of the Yoon Group was not something you declined. Yong-soo sat across from her and laid out everything Victor had found. He did it calmly, methodically, without emotion. He showed her the contracts. He showed her the testimonies. He showed her a side-by-side comparison of what Bryce's standard agreement looked like versus what a fair industry deal looked like. Colette's face went pale as she read. She had been about to let Sharon sign. When she looked up, her eyes were wide. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because Sharon deserves to know what she's walking into," Yong-soo said. Colette studied him for a long moment. She was a sharp woman. She had been in the music industry for 12 years, and she could read people the way she read contracts, carefully and with an eye for what was being left unsaid. "You really care about her," Colette said. Yong-soo stood up. He pushed the folder across the table to her. "Tell her the truth about Calloway. Don't tell her the information came from me." He left. Colette tried to follow his instructions. She really did. She went to Sharon's apartment that evening with the folder and sat on the couch and told Sharon everything. She showed her the contracts. She explained the pattern. She described what had happened to the two women who signed with Bryce before her. Sharon listened to all of it with her hands folded in her lap and her face very still. When Colette finished, Sharon was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Where did you get all of this?" Colette hesitated. She thought about the promise she made to Yong-soo. She thought about keeping his name out of it. Then she looked at Sharon's face and decided that this woman deserved the whole truth. "Yong-soo brought it to me," Colette said. "He had his team investigate Calloway. He flew back from Manhattan to hand me this folder personally, and he specifically asked me not to tell you it came from him." Sharon sat perfectly still. She looked down at the folder in her lap. She ran her fingers over the edge of it. This man, this impossible, infuriating, emotionally unavailable man. He could not pick up the phone and call her back. He could not tell her how he felt. He could not ask her a simple question about who answered her phone. But he could fly across the country to protect her career from a threat she did not even know existed, and he did not want credit for it. She picked up her phone and called Desmond. She told him everything, all of it. Yong-soo sitting outside her apartment, the silence after Palo Alto, Bryce Calloway, the folder, all of it. Desmond was quiet for a long time. Sharon could hear him breathing on the other end. Finally, he said, "Sis, that man sat outside your apartment all night because he heard another man's voice on your phone. Then he protected your career from the shadows and specifically asked not to be thanked for it. I need you to stop pretending you don't know what this is. That man is in love with you. He just doesn't know how to say it yet." Sharon met Bryce at his studio one final time. She brought Colette. She brought the folder. They sat in the lounge area where Bryce had poured her coffee and complimented her voice and told her he could make her a star. This time, Sharon did not drink the coffee. She sat across from him and placed the folder on the table between them. "I'm not going to be signing with you," she said. Her voice was calm, steady. The same steadiness she carried when she sang, the kind that came from somewhere deep, somewhere that could not be shaken easily. Bryce looked at the folder. He looked at Sharon. His smile did not disappear immediately. It faded slowly, like a light on a dimmer switch. "Can I ask why?" "Because I know about the contracts. I know about the ownership clauses. I know about the two women who signed with you and spent years trying to get their own music back. And I know that your interest in me was never really about my sound. Bryce leaned forward. The charm dropped from his face. Let me guess. Your billionaire boyfriend had someone dig into my business. That's what this is. This is about me making an informed decision about my own career. That's all this is. Bryce's voice turned cold. You think that Korean billionaire is going to build your career? He's going to get bored of you in 6 months. You're a novelty to him. A pretty voice and a pretty face. Men like him collect people. You're just the latest thing on the shelf. Sharon stood up. She picked up the folder. She looked Bryce directly in the eyes, and when she spoke, her voice was as clear and as powerful as it was on any stage she had ever stood on. Men like you tell women what they're worth so those women stop believing in themselves. I've been singing since I was 16 years old. In my bedroom, in closets, at open mic nights where the audience was 5 people and a bartender who wasn't listening. I recorded demos on my phone and uploaded them from a studio apartment that cost $600 a month. Nobody handed me anything. Nobody built this for me. And nobody, especially not you, is going to make me feel like I need permission to exist in this industry. She walked out. Colette followed her, barely containing a grin. Bryce sat alone in his expensive studio, surrounded by platinum records and state-of-the-art equipment. And for the first time in a long time, the room felt empty. What Bryce did not know yet was that the 2 artists who had left him quietly were no longer staying quiet. Victor Rhee had reached out to both of them through legal channels and connected them with an entertainment attorney who specialized in contract disputes. Both women had agreed to share their stories publicly. The first article was already being drafted. That evening, Sharon drove to Young-Soo's hotel in Beverly Hills. She pulled into the parking garage, took the elevator to the penthouse floor, and knocked on his door. He opened it. He was not wearing a suit, just a plain black t-shirt and dark pants. He looked tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep could fix, but the kind that came from carrying something heavy and pretending it weighed nothing. Sharon held up the folder. You did this. Colette wasn't supposed to tell you. Well, she did. So here we are. And I need you to answer something for me, Young-Soo. Why didn't you just come to me? Why do you keep doing everything from a distance? Why do you show up to my shows and stand in the back and leave before I can find you? Why do you send flowers instead of knocking on my door? Why did you sit outside my apartment all night instead of just asking me who was in my house? He was silent. He stood in the doorway and he looked at her, and he did not have a prepared answer because he had never been asked these questions before. Nobody had ever cared enough to ask. He let her in. They sat across from each other in the living room of the penthouse. The city sparkled through the windows. The room was too big for 2 people and too quiet for the weight of what was about to be said. Young-Soo spoke slowly, not because he was choosing his words carefully, but because the words were hard to find. He told her about his father, a man who ran one of the most powerful families in Korea and measured love in obedience. You did not tell Young-Soo's father you loved him. You showed him by performing, by succeeding, by being excellent in every measurable way. Affection was not spoken in the Yoon household. It was implied through duty. He told her about his mother, a woman who loved deeply and showed it through sacrifice. She gave up her own career, her own ambitions, her own identity to support her husband's empire. She never complained. She never asked for anything. She simply gave, quietly and completely, and Young-Soo grew up believing that love was something you demonstrated through what you were willing to endure, not something you said out loud. So I send flowers instead of saying I miss you, he said. I show up at your performances instead of telling you that your voice is the most extraordinary thing I've ever heard. I sit outside your apartment instead of asking if I'm losing you, because asking means admitting that I'm afraid. And I have never been afraid of anything in my life until you. Sharon listened. She did not interrupt. She did not try to fix it or make it smaller. She let him sit in his own honesty for the first time, and she let the room hold the weight of it. When he finished, she leaned forward. Young-Soo, I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm not asking you to unlearn 33 years of your life in one night. I'm asking you to be present, not from the back of a room, not from across the street. Not through folders and flowers and bodyguards, here, with me, in the same space, saying the real words. He looked at her. And for the first time in the entire story, his guard came all the way down. His eyes were wet. He did not look away. He did not try to hide it. He reached out and took her hand. It was the most intimate moment either of them had ever experienced. Nothing more than his hand closing around hers. And it said everything that he had not been able to say for 3 months. 3 weeks later, the fallout from Bryce Calloway hit the music industry like an earthquake. The first article dropped on a Tuesday morning. It was a detailed investigation published by a major entertainment outlet, featuring on-the-record interviews with the 2 female artists who had signed with Bryce and lost control of their music. The article laid out the predatory contract clauses, the isolation tactics, the way Bryce positioned himself as both savior and gatekeeper. By noon, the article had been shared over 200,000 times. By evening, 3 more artists had come forward with similar stories. Bryce's production company lost 4 major clients within a week. His label's distribution deal was suspended pending review. Industry figures who had publicly praised him 6 months ago were now issuing carefully worded statements distancing themselves from his brand. Sharon's name appeared in the coverage, but not as a victim. She was mentioned as the artist who had been offered a deal with Calloway and walked away before signing. The quotes from Colette in the article made Sharon sound exactly like what she was, a smart, self-respecting woman who did her homework and refused to be manipulated. The attention changed everything. Sharon's social media following tripled almost overnight. The video of her Palo Alto performance started circulating on every platform. Her original song, the one about wanting someone who stands close but never reaches out, became a phenomenon. People were posting their own videos reacting to it. Radio stations picked it up. Music blogs ran features about her voice. A major label in New York reached out directly to Colette with a deal that made Bryce's offer look like a lemonade stand. Full creative control, ownership of her masters, a marketing budget that would put her music in front of millions of people. And the terms were fair, more than fair. They were exceptional. Sharon flew to Manhattan to sign the deal. She sat in a glass conference room on the 32nd floor of a building in Midtown, with Colette on one side and a team of lawyers on the other. Desmond was on video call, sitting in his apartment in Sacramento, wearing his Sacramento Kings t-shirt, grinning so hard his face looked like it might split in half. When Sharon signed the final page, Desmond started clapping through the phone. Then he started crying. Then he said, "I'm not crying, there's something in my eye," and everyone in the conference room laughed. Sharon was on top of the world, but there was a shadow on the edge of it. Yongsoo had been keeping his distance again, not out of fear this time and not out of jealousy, out of respect. He did not want anyone to look at Sharon's success and attribute it to his connections. He knew how the world worked. He knew that a powerful man standing next to a rising woman could become a headline that overshadowed everything she had built on her own. He wanted the world to see what he already knew. Sharon Whitmore did not need Yongsoo Yoon. She never had. Her talent was hers. Her voice was hers. Her strength was hers. Then a gossip blog ruined it. The article was published on a Thursday afternoon. The headline read, "Rising singer linked to Korean billionaire, talent or connections." The piece was short, speculative, and deliberately cruel. It implied that Sharon's sudden rise in visibility was not because of her voice, but because of her proximity to Yongsoo Yoon's money and influence. The comments section was worse. People accused her of using Yongsoo for access. Others accused Yongsoo of treating her like a pet project. Sharon saw the article on her phone while she was sitting in the back of a car heading to a studio session. She read the headline. She read the comments. She locked her phone and stared out the window for a long time. It hurt, not because she cared what strangers on the internet thought about her. She had been criticized before. She had been underestimated her entire life. That part she could handle. What hurt was knowing that Yongsoo would see this, and she knew exactly what he would do. He would pull away. He would convince himself that his presence in her life was a liability. He would disappear into his empire and tell himself he was doing it to protect her. She was right. Yongsoo read the article in his Manhattan office. He called Victor. "Limit any public-facing interaction between me and Sharon until this dies down. No events, no appearances. I don't want her name next to mine in any headline." Victor hesitated. "Boss, with respect, I think you should talk to her before you make that decision. I'm not asking for your opinion. I know, I'm giving it anyway. Yongsoo hung up. Sharon called him 30 minutes later. He almost did not answer, but he thought about what she had said to him in the penthouse that night. Be present, not from a distance. Here. He picked up. Don't you dare, Sharon said. Her voice was not angry. It was firm, unshakable. The same voice that had told Bryce Calloway he would never make her doubt herself. Don't you dare use my career as an excuse to run away from this. I know you saw that article, and I know you're sitting in your office right now planning how to quietly disappear so nobody can connect your name to mine. I know you, Yongsoo. I know exactly how your mind works. He was silent. I don't need you to protect me from a headline. I need you to be standing next to me when the next one drops. That's what this is. That's what love is. You don't get to only show up in the shadows. You show up in the light too, even when the light is harsh. That sentence sat in his chest like a stone. 2 weeks later, Sharon performed at a high-profile music and arts festival in Aspen, Colorado. It was the biggest stage she had ever stood on. The audience was over 1,000 people. The who's who of the music industry were in attendance. Cameras everywhere. Yongsoo flew to Aspen that morning. He walked into the venue. He did not go to the back of the room. He did not find a shadow to stand in. He walked to the front row, sat down, and folded his hands in his lap. When Sharon stepped onto the stage and saw him sitting there in the front row in plain sight, not hiding, not running, just sitting there and looking at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered, she almost lost her composure. Her eyes burned. Her throat tightened. But she was a professional. She took a breath, leaned into the microphone, and sang. She sang like her life depended on it. She sang like she was telling their entire story in 4 minutes and 30 seconds. And when she finished, the audience erupted. After the show, a reporter caught Yongsoo outside the venue. The camera was rolling. They asked him about the gossip article. They asked if he was involved with Sharon Whitmore. Yongsoo looked directly into the camera. His face was calm. His voice was steady. Sharon Whitmore is the most talented person I've ever met in my life. And I am a better man because she allows me to stand in the same room while she sings. If the world has a problem with that, the world can speak to me directly. The clip went viral within 3 hours. 1 month after the Aspen Festival, Beverly Hills, the same apartment building where this entire story started. Sharon was standing at her kitchen counter. Her debut album was in the final stages of production. Her single had been climbing the charts for 2 weeks. She had been invited to perform at 3 major award ceremonies. Colette had hired 2 assistants just to keep up with the requests coming in. Everything Sharon had ever dreamed of was happening. The girl who sang in bedroom closets and uploaded demos from a $600 studio apartment in Scottsdale was now being mentioned in the same breath as artists she had grown up idolizing. Her mother would have been so proud. Sharon thought about her mother every day, and lately she thought about her even more because her mother had once told her, "Baby, your voice is going to take you places I'll never get to see, but I'll be listening." Tonight, though, Sharon was not thinking about her album or her award show invitations or her streaming numbers. Tonight, she was standing at her window, looking down at the quiet street below. There was a black Escalade parked across the street. She smiled. It was a slow smile, the kind that starts in your chest before it reaches your face. She walked to the front door. She opened it. She stepped outside into the cool evening air. Yongsoo was leaning against the car. He was wearing a dark coat. His hands were in his pockets. He looked up when she appeared in the doorway, and he did not pretend he had not been watching her window. He did not pretend he was there by accident. He did not pretend anything at all. She walked toward him. Her feet were bare on the cool pavement, and she did not care. "You're doing it again," she said. "Doing what?" "Parking outside my apartment. I wasn't sitting inside the car this time. I was standing out here. That's progress." She laughed, and the sound of Sharon Whitmore laughing did to Yongsoo what it always did. It reached into his chest and found the one place he could not defend, the one door he could not lock, the one wall he could not build high enough, and it opened everything up. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Sharon's breath caught. Her eyes went wide. Her hand came up to cover her mouth. But when he opened the box, it was not a ring. It was a key, a single silver key on a simple chain. "It's to my penthouse," he said. "Here in Beverly Hills, I'm not asking you to move in. I'm not asking for anything. I'm giving you this because I want you to always have somewhere to go. Somewhere that's yours, no matter where I am. Seoul, Manhattan, wherever. I want you to know that there is a door in this world that will always open for you, and it will always be yours." Sharon took the key. She held it in her palm. It was warm from being in his pocket. She closed her fingers around it and looked up at him. "Young-soo." "Yes." "You sat outside my apartment all night because my brother answered my phone." A muscle in his jaw twitched. "Yes." "You canceled a trip worth $400 million. "Yes." "You flew back from Manhattan to protect my career from a man I didn't even know was dangerous. And you asked not to be thanked for it." "Yes." "You stood in the front row at Aspen and told the whole world on camera what I mean to you." "I did." She stepped closer, close enough that she could see the way the streetlight caught the edge of his jaw, close enough that she could see his pulse beating in his neck, close enough that the space between them was barely a breath. "So when are you going to say it?" she asked quietly. "The real words, not through flowers, not through keys, not through grand gestures and viral interviews. Just you and me right here on this sidewalk saying the actual thing that you've been carrying around for months." Young-soo looked at her. The streetlight was catching the side of her face, and her eyes were deep and warm and patient. She was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen, and he had seen everything the world had to offer. He had stood in palaces and penthouses and private jets and rooms full of people who would have given anything for 5 minutes of his attention. None of it came close to this. None of it came close to standing on a sidewalk in Beverly Hills, looking at a woman in bare feet who had once sung to a room of 5 people and meant every note. He took a breath. "I love you, Sharon." The words came out quiet, not dramatic, not rehearsed, not wrapped in metaphor or hidden behind action. Just 3 words standing on their own for the first time in his life. "I've loved you since San Francisco. Since you looked at me the same way you looked at everyone else in that room. Since you treated me like I was just another person, because nobody in my entire life has ever made me feel that ordinary and that important at the same time. I love you because you are the only person who has ever made me want to be known, not feared, not respected, not obeyed, just known. And I'm sorry it took me this long to say it. I'm sorry I sat in cars and stood in the backs of rooms and hid behind everything I could find. You deserved better than that. You deserved the words. And I'm giving them to you now because you taught me that showing up isn't enough if you never open your mouth and say the thing that matters." Sharon's eyes filled with tears. They slid down her cheeks and she did not wipe them away. She smiled through them, that slow, chest-first smile that undid him every single time. "That's all I ever wanted," she whispered. "Just the words, Young-soo, just the words." He pulled her into him. His arms wrapped around her and she pressed her face against his chest and he held her. Right there on the sidewalk. Right in front of the same apartment building where he had sat in the dark 3 months ago, alone and afraid and too proud to admit it. Right in the same spot where this entire story began. They stood like that for a long time. The Escalade hummed quietly behind them. The streetlight buzzed overhead. Somewhere down the block, a neighbor's dog barked at nothing. The night was warm and still, and the sky over Beverly Hills was clear enough to see a handful of stars, which was rare in the city, but tonight it felt like the universe was making an exception. Sharon's phone buzzed in the pocket of her sweatpants. She pulled it out and looked at the screen. It was a text from Desmond. "If that man is standing outside your apartment again, I swear I am driving down there right now." Sharon laughed and showed the text to Young-soo. He read it. The corner of his mouth twitched into something that might have been a smile. "Your brother is going to be a problem," he said. "My brother is going to love you," Sharon said. "He just doesn't know it yet." She texted Desmond back. "Go to sleep, Des. Everything is fine, better than fine." She put her phone away. She looked up at Young-soo. He looked down at her, and in that look was everything. The fear, the pride, the jealousy, the silence, the flowers, the folder, the front row at Aspen, the viral clip. The key, And now, finally, the words. This story started with a man who did not know how to say what he felt, and a woman who refused to accept anything less than the truth. It started with a misunderstanding and a long, dark night in the back of a parked car. It moved through silence and distance and fear, and the kind of love that does not announce itself loudly, but shows up, again and again, in every way it can, until someone is brave enough to give it a voice. Yongsoo was brave enough tonight. And Sharon had always been brave. Since the first time she opened her mouth to sing in a room full of strangers and decided that her voice mattered. Since the first time she looked at a powerful man and treated him like a human being. Since the first time she told someone no and meant it. Since the first time she told someone yes and meant it even more. They went inside. They sat on her couch. She made tea. He held the cup but did not drink it because he was watching her move around the kitchen and thinking about how strange and wonderful it was that the most powerful man in any room he had ever entered felt most powerful right here, in a small apartment in Beverly Hills, watching a woman in bare feet make honey lemon tea. They talked until the sun came up, about everything and nothing, about Seoul and Sacramento and Scottsdale and San Francisco, about her mother and his father, about what it means to be known by someone and what it costs to let them in, about music and silence and the difference between showing up and being present. When the morning light came through the windows, Sharon fell asleep with her head on his shoulder. Yongsoo did not move. He sat perfectly still, the way he had sat in the back of the Escalade 3 months ago, but this time the stillness was not pain. It was peace. And somewhere in Sacramento, Desmond Whitmore was already in his car, driving south, because he absolutely did not believe that everything was fine, and he was going to need to see this Yongsoo guy face to face before he believed a single word his sister said. But that is a story for another day. This one ends here, with two people who found each other across every barrier the world could build, across culture and language and fear and pride and silence, across all the reasons it should not have worked, and it worked anyway. Because love, when it is real, does not wait for you to be ready. It shows up. It sits outside your apartment in the dark. It flies across the country with a folder full of evidence. It stands in the front row and tells the whole world what it feels. And eventually, when you are finally brave enough, it opens your mouth and says the words, "I love you." That's all it ever takes. If this story made you feel something, drop a comment below and tell me which moment hit you the hardest. Was it the night in the Escalade? Was it the song in Palo Alto? Was it the confrontation with Bryce? Was it the front row at Aspen? Or was it those 3 words on the sidewalk? Tell me. I want to know. And if you made it all the way to the end of this story, you already know this channel is where the best stories live. We will see you in the next one.